Hey you guys, my name is Diane and welcome to my live broadcast today. Today we are going to be discussing food, allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities. This is what I am most passionate about, and this is what I really love to have the opportunity to share with women, some of the experiences that I have and some of the information that I have because of the research that I have been doing over the past couple of years. So I help women figure out food and fitness so that they can feel and look their best and live their most authentic life. My struggles with food and allergies and intolerances and sensitivities actually started for me back when I was an infant. I had some severe sensitivities and intolerances, I guess, to milk. And back in the day, there wasn't a lot of information about what to do with, babies or children when they had these sort of allergies or intolerances. And from what I know now, there is some history of that in my family. So I was basically raised as an infant on sugar water because every time I had milk or formula at the time, I was violently ill. And so my body just couldn't break that down. At the time, my parents didn't know what that was, and they just thought I was sort of a finicky eater. And throughout my childhood, I just naturally steered clear of dairy or any kind of, milk-based products. And I didn't really understand why, but it was just something that I was always sort of turned off by. As I grew up and became a mom myself, my son, I had him and I started nursing him, and he had some reactions to just breast milk. And when we went to our doctor to try to get help, the doctor determined that there's no such thing as a milk allergy and insisted that we stop nursing and put him on formula. Of course, because he had a definite body reaction to milk, and now we know soy, he got worse when we put him on formula from breast milk, and pretty much suffered his first year of life with major vomiting and all kinds of digestional issues, even as an infant. Along comes my daughter 6 years later, had the same sort of issues with her in just having, some problems digestively with, dairy, or with me basically trying to nurse her. So instead of going to the doctor, I went to a lactation consultant, and the lactation consultant immediately identified the issues that she was having with a milk sensitivity or a milk allergy. We weaned me from all dairy products, and then as soon as my body was cleansed from dairy, I could continue nursing my daughter, and she had absolutely zero issues with vomiting, diarrhea, crankiness, colicky kind of symptoms. Any of that kind of stuff just immediately went away, and I was able to nurse her for 14 months. So our family has a history of definite dairy sensitivities and intolerances, and it goes all the way back to myself when I was a child. So we started piecing some of those things together and have determined that myself and my two children all have issues with dairy, but they vary and the symptoms are different. So this is what I'm hoping to help share with you guys today, and especially my female audience, in realizing that two people will not have the same reaction to the same type of food, and that just because you do not have an allergy to something, or something isn't deemed to be an allergy specific type of food, doesn't mean that you will not have effects that are going to make you feel less than your best. So what I would like to do is sort of define what the medical industry has for all three of these situations so that we can kind of see where they lay out in society. So an allergy is, and this is from internet sources like WebMD. So allergies happen when the immune system mistakes an ingredient in a food as harmful and creates antibodies to fight it. So an allergy can be diagnosed. It can be tested through some allergy testing at a doctor's office. And then once you know that you have a specific allergy to a certain type of food or ingredient, then it's very clear cut. You just eliminate that thing from your diet. So allergies are pretty simple. Once you kind of make that connection between what you're ingesting and a feeling or a reaction, you can go get tested. It can be proven and you can eliminate it. So allergies are clear cut. Now, food intolerance is the first stage where we start to get into that gray area. So food intolerance is kind of defined like this. Symptoms are similar to a food allergy, and these symptoms occur when an ingredient or a compound in a food irritates a person's digestive system or when a person is unable to digest food. The best way to determine if you have a food intolerance, because it won't show up on any kind of test in a doctor's office, is to just basically trial and error. Research some things on the internet and see if there are some articles written about maybe a certain type of food or an ingredient in a food that could possibly making you cause you to have some sort of reaction. And then you want to kind of keep a food diary and kind of track when you ingest that food item and then how you feel. And if you see a pattern, then that might be a food you want to either eliminate totally or just sort of control how much of it you bring into your life. And then the other way that you can determine whether you have a food intolerance is to do an elimination diet where you eliminate a bunch of foods and then give yourself about a week of having your system clean and then slowly start introducing foods back in. And that'll help you identify whether a specific food might be something that you've become intolerant to. And then a food sensitivity is by far the grayest area when it comes to determining how something is affecting you as an individual. And it's sort of defined or explained like this. A sensitivity is something that happens or reaction that you get after consuming a food, but it's not consistent. So I think this is the area that probably most commonly affects women. And I know for myself specifically, this was the thing that really started to make me feel crazy about food and really, and I think I went through even a period of sort of depression when it came to food because I couldn't pinpoint what was making me sick. And I was eating a very healthy and a very what would be considered clean diet. And I was still having these symptoms that were occurring, and I didn't understand why. And this all started happening probably about 3 years ago when I started having all of these really strange things happening to my body. And I would have severe bloating problems where I would, literally like have to have 2 sets of clothes. And it would go from like a 1 day period. I would wake up the next morning and literally could not fit into any of my clothes and I couldn't understand why. Or I was having really severe water retention issues where I sort of explained it like when I woke up in the morning and my feet hit the ground and I stood up, I felt like my body was blowing up like a water balloon and I could put on anywhere from 5 to 7 pounds in a day and it was all pure water weight and I couldn't explain why. And I would have to literally like do a deep cleanse of everything and just literally go on sort of like a liquid diet for 24 hours. And then the very next day I would be fine. And there was really no way I could pinpoint what specific item was making this happen to me. Some other areas I started suffering where I would have severe brain fog, where I couldn't concentrate on anything. I wasn't getting any tasks done. I could look straight at my kids and not remember their name. So I was having some memory issues. I just felt like a complete mess. And I knew a lot of it had to do with my hormones, but I knew also that a lot of it had to do with what I was consuming in my diet that were triggering all these things with my hormones that were making me just completely feel crazy and out of control. And as I started further researching, I realized that a lot of these same things that I was going through were a lot of things that a lot of other women were going through, but a lot of women suffer in silence. And so I sort of made it, a promise to myself that when I figured all of this out, I would do my best to make sure that I shared it with as many women as possible, because it was a really dark and scary and lonely time for me when I went through all of this. And I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to have a different experience. So what I did is exactly what is suggested to do. I started keeping a food diary and I did a couple of elimination diets. And I eliminated the 3 big food items that cause the most problems, regardless if you're male, female, or whatever age you are. And that was dairy, gluten, and soy. Now, the thing that I want to caution you about if you do decide that you want to go through an elimination type of diet is be very focused on what is best for you and makes you feel good about the process. And try to avoid some of these fad diets or diets that are, or diet plans that are extreme, because that will just add to that crazy feeling that you have going on already. And really try to focus on you and your lifestyle and your family, and take it upon yourself to design your own diet plan or your own philosophy for food, so that you don't have to leave your lifestyle to feel your best and become healthy again. So I read all the books and I tried all the plans, and this is what I found worked best for me. Because of my family history with dairy issues, dairy was the first thing that I completely eliminated from my diet, because we already had a history there. So that was super easy, and it was pretty easy for me to figure out the foods that had dairy in them. And so what you want to look for when you're reading an ingredient label is, I completely bypass where it says ingredients and I go right down below that where it has the allergen warnings. And I read that first. And if it has whey in it, or casein, or any of those milk products in it, I just completely avoided it. So I went about 3 weeks with no dairy, started feeling some relief of my symptoms, but noticed that I was having some other symptoms that seemed even more obvious. And my family kind of dubbed it as gluten face. So I would wake up some mornings with my face completely inflamed, and I would have this really inflamed socket under my eye. And it was usually after I had consumed some gluten. So the second thing that I eliminated from my diet was gluten or any gluten products. The thing that I would love to share with you and caution you about with gluten is, when you go gluten-free, the one thing you do not want to get sucked into is the food marketing labels of gluten-free products. Gluten-free products now, for me in hindsight, were one of the biggest culprits for making me sick. And that's because anything that's gluten-free is pretty much a processed food. And if you're taking gluten out of a food, you're having to put another item in there to fill its place. And this is when I got really, really sick. So food that I was eating 4 and 5 years ago and having no problem with was now the food that I was noticing was making me the most sick. And a lot of it was very healthy food. So one of the things that was making me sick from just the very first bite was my Vans gluten-free, dairy-free waffles. Super healthy, definitely a better alternative than the Eggo waffles or some of the other frozen waffles you find in the market. But they had an ingredient in there that was the thing that I now know was making me my most sick and causing me the most problems with my hormones. And that is soy lecithin. And soy lecithin is probably the #1 food additive that they put in gluten-free food, because it sort of acts the same way in processed food. And it's basically just a binding agent. So if you have to take gluten out and you have to put something in its place, most often it's going to be soy lecithin. Soy, in any way, shape, or form, is that thing for women that will just throw your hormones completely out of whack, and has all kinds of other health concerns with it as well. And I'll go into that in bigger detail in another video. But just know that that's that other thing you want to look for in your food ingredients labels. So ingredient label, and then right before that has the allergen warning. Anything that has soy in it has to have that allergy warning, because there are so many people that have those adverse effects to soy. So how do we tell if we're allergic, intolerant, or sensitive? I would say if you're having some severe reactions, you owe it to yourself to go to the doctor and get tested, if that's what you feel like you want to do to have some peace of mind. I knew I wasn't allergic to anything. I just knew that I wasn't feeling well. So I didn't necessarily go to the doctor to get those allergy tests. I did go the elimination route and just kind of trial and errored it and did a process of elimination. And to me, a sensitivity is something that is probably the hardest to deal with and to get society to understand than any of the other two. So an intolerance is something that, you know, like I said, it kind of goes along the lines of an allergy, but it's not going to affect you the same way as a true sensitivity does. And a sensitivity to me, in my position and with my family history and what I went through with my hormones, was a thing that was the worst, because it was the hardest thing to pinpoint and it was the hardest thing to really make that body connection with. So, some things to consider too when we're talking about allergies and sensitivities and those things is that with dairy, you know, we have the lactose intolerance, which means, you know, you kind of have that gassy sort of feeling with dairy. Dairy also has been known to cause major inflammation as well as nasal and sinus allergies. It creates a mucus in your body. So if you're noticing that you're having some, you know, sinus allergies, dairy is definitely one of those things you want to pay some attention to and really start tracking. Gluten, of course, we have the whole community of celiacs who have the celiac disease, which can be deadly and it's super serious. And that is, in fact, a true gluten allergy, where if you're just intolerant to gluten, you're probably suffering things like the foggy brain, water retention, headaches, some crankiness and mood swings are also related to gluten sensitivities. So pretty much everything that a woman feels goes back to that gluten sensitivity. So don't deny those feelings and think that it's just the way you're supposed to feel. Trust me, you're not. That there is relief on the other end if you can tie the two things together. And then again, soy, like I said, in my opinion, is the bigger culprit of it all, because there are some health-related issues with cancers for women down the road, as well as you know, some of the water retentions and the effects that soy can have on you and the hormone imbalances as well. So the thing about soy, and I'll share a little bit of my story and how I pinpointed soy as the biggest culprit for me. And I'll give you an example of a food that really shocked me with soy. So I love turkey jerky, and this is a very high quality turkey jerky right here. There's no trans fat or no nitrates, there's no MSG, gluten-free, super healthy, high protein, low fat snack food. And then there's beef jerky. Well, we always went the turkey jerky route because turkey is deemed more healthy than beef, so I was eating turkey jerky. The smallest, like this big, of a piece of turkey jerky could make me sick for weeks. And I would immediately feel the effects of it, but I never made the connection because it was turkey jerky, and in my head, that was a healthy food. When I read the food label and saw soy, like I didn't realize, I didn't put the two connections together between teriyaki jerky and soy, that when I finally made that connection and switched over to beef jerky, which in my mind was the least healthier of the two, I stopped getting sick because beef jerky did not have soy in it. So it's super important to get very, very diligent with reading those food labels and making sure that those three big culprits, dairy, gluten, and soy, are not listed in that allergen warning information. If it is, then it might be a food that you want to put on that list of you're going to try later after you get yourself through one of those elimination diets. The thing about soy that's super scary too is that you can ingest soy and not feel the effects of it for up to 3 days later. And the effects can stay in your body for months. So once you determine if soy is that thing that is causing those sensitivities or those hormone imbalances or some of those symptoms that I talked about, if it is soy that's doing that to you, you really want to make sure that you are diligent about not having a slip up with it, because it is that thing that could make you feel sick for months after just one small exposure. And I know for myself, it is so severe with my body now that I've completely eliminated soy, that before I eat at a restaurant, I have to ask them what kind of oil they use to prepare their food. And I made this connection when I was going through my little process of elimination and having some temper tantrums and a little bit of depression about food and all the things I had to eliminate. And I refused to give up French fries and tortilla chips. Those are my two things. Those are my jams. I wasn't going to give those two things up because I had given up so many other things. And I was sort of having a little pity party and temper tantrum about those two things. But every time I would go to a restaurant and order French fries, I would be sick, and I would be sick for weeks. And so I finally made that connection between soybean oil and my reactions and sensitivity to soy. So I go to restaurants now, and before I order French fries, I ask if they in fact use soybean oil. If they use soybean oil, then I choose not to eat anything that's been fried at all, because one French fry at a restaurant could make me sick for weeks. And the same thing with tortilla chips. The good thing is, because soy is on one of those high allergen lists, a lot of restaurants now are switching over to different types of oils, and they're using more of a vegetable oil. Now, if you do your research, of course, you know, a safflower oil is not one of the best oils that you could have, or any kind of corn oil or vegetable oil is not going to be the best oil to have. But if it doesn't make you sick and you're not ingesting it every day, it's the better of a worst case decision. So I would much rather eat something that's fried in an oil that's deemed less healthy than something that's fried in an oil that I know for a fact is going to make me sick. So you kind of have to get to that point where you're going to be able to make those decisions for yourself from the education and the experience that you have when you do your research and you do your elimination diets and figure out which foods are triggers for you. Now, one other thing I wanted to share with you guys today, and then like I said, I will be going deeper into these food items and how it affects us women, and some things that you can do to kind of keep yourself from falling in this trap of constantly feeling sick with food and wondering if you're going crazy in subsequent live broadcasts that I'll be doing over the next few weeks. So make sure that you hit that live notifications button at the top of your video screen there, and that will notify you when I go live. I'm scheduled to go live every day at 2 p.m. I'll do it Monday through Friday Central Standard Time, so you can kind of put that on your calendar as well. And then all these will be recorded in my newsfeed as well, so you won't miss them if you go back and look for them. But an interesting fact about soy, and this will be the last thing I talk about with soy, is that soy has now been determined to cause hyperthyroidism in adults if that adult has been given soy formula as an infant. So if you were fed soy formula as an infant and you currently have hyperthyroidism, there is a direct connection between those two situations. So, you know, that is kind of a twofold situation in my opinion. I feel relieved that there are some answers for these women who are going through these thyroid problems, that it's not them and it's not anything that they're doing wrong or anything that they're doing to fail their body. It's just that we didn't have as much experience or education or history with this one food item. Now, going forward, I think it's a gift that we have this information. If you are gonna have children, or you've had children, or or you have infants at home and they're having some sensitivities to maybe even your own breast milk, and you have to do the process of elimination for yourself so you can continue breastfeeding, or your physician or pediatrician is suggesting that you switch your child over to soy formula, I would say do your research, and you have to do what you feel is best in your heart for your family and your lifestyle and your situation. But just be informed enough to know that when you make a decision, you know all the consequences that are involved with that. And that research is out there now that shows that infants who are fed soy formula do have a very high probability of having hyperthyroidism as an adult. And the reason for that is that soy is just one of those things that just causes our thyroid to just go completely out of whack. And as infants, we're in that developmental stage, and that is that thing that just sort of is the precursor to things later on in life. So I hope this has given you some relief or helped you feel like you are not going crazy if you are having some symptoms like, foggy memory, or not being able to complete a task, or suddenly you're feeling certain ways that are making you feel sick that maybe you didn't feel a couple years ago. Trust me, you're not crazy. It is a real feeling. It is a real situation. Do some research about how it is that you're feeling. Do some research on the three big culprits. That's dairy, gluten, and soy. See if some of the descriptions that you're reading about and researching about are things that you are feeling. I think you owe it to yourself to keep a food diary and see if you can kind of pinpoint some situations or some foods that are making you feel specific ways consistently. And then do an elimination diet. Take some of those things out of your diet for a series of time and see if you start feeling better. If you start feeling better, then in my opinion, it's worth it to find some workarounds for those foods and then introduce them slowly and see if those same reactions keep occurring for you. We as women have a lot on our plate. We deserve to feel our best. We deserve to be living in our authentic life. And I think sometimes it's worth it to put a little bit of work into ourselves to make sure that we are not making ourselves sick just because society is trying to make, things with food seem crazy when in fact they are actually real feelings that you're having. As always, I love sharing with you guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the comment section below. I will go back and reread those and I will answer any questions that you might have or comment if you've left a message for me. If you'd like some more detailed information, as always, feel free to reach out to me. I can be reached at diane@parhamfitness.com, or you can always private message me here.